friends here. Let's help each other out.
But a man may not live under the same heaven.
Made me a promise, a special.
Imagine spending $250 million on a movie, hiring the biggest stars, building massive sets, and creating cutting-edge special effects. Now imagine watching it all burn. That's exactly what happened to Disney with John Carter. They lost over $200 million, and the executive in charge, he lost his job. But John Carter isn't alone. Today, we're counting down the 10 biggest action movie disasters in Hollywood history. Movies that didn't just fail. They obliterated studios, ended careers, and proved that sometimes bigger isn't better. It's just more expensive. If you're enjoying this breakdown so far, hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more Hollywood disasters coming your way. Now, let's get into it. When we talk about box office bombs, we're not just talking about movies that underperformed. We're talking about films that lost studios tens, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars. These are the kind of failures that get executives fired, shut down production companies, and make investors think twice about ever funding another movie again. To understand just how badly these movies failed, you need to know how Hollywood math works. A movie doesn't just need to make back its production budget, it needs to cover marketing costs, which can be just as expensive as making the film itself. Then there's distribution, theater cuts, and all the other expenses that pile up. As a general rule, a movie needs to make about 2.5 times its production budget just to break even. So when you see a movie with a $200 million budget that only makes $100 million at the box office, you're looking at a catastrophic loss. The movies on this list didn't just fail to break even. They crashed and burned in spectacular fashion. Some of them bankrupted entire studios. Others ended promising franchises before they even started. And a few of them are so bad, the studios pretend they never existed. Let's start with number 10. Number 10, Sahara. Matthew McConaughey was riding high in the mid-2000s. He was America's favorite rom-com leading man, and studios were throwing money at him to do just about anything. So when he decided he wanted to be an action star, Paramount Pictures said, "Sure, here's $160 million. Go make us the next Indiana Jones." Sahara was supposed to be the start of a franchise based on Clive Cussler's adventure novels. McConaughey played Dirk Pitt, a treasure hunter searching for a lost Civil War battleship in the Sahara Desert. It had everything you'd want in a summer blockbuster: exotic locations, explosions, wisecracking heroes, and a plot involving international conspiracies. But audiences didn't care. The movie opened in April 2005 and immediately underperformed. It made $119 million worldwide against a budget that ballooned to $160 million when you factor in all the production costs. After marketing and distribution, Paramount lost around $40 million. The failure of Sahara killed any plans for sequels and damaged McConaughey's action star ambitions. He'd eventually reinvent himself as a serious dramatic actor, but Sahara remains a reminder that not every rom-com star can make the jump to action hero. Number 9, R.I.P.D. In 2013, Universal Pictures thought they had a winner. Take Ryan Reynolds, pair him with Jeff Bridges, throw in some supernatural action, and you've got yourself a hit. After all, Reynolds had just come off Green Lantern, and surely he'd learn from that disaster, right? Wrong. R.I.P.D. was essentially Men in Black, but with dead cops instead of aliens. Reynolds played a recently deceased police officer who joins the Rest in Peace Department, a supernatural law enforcement agency that hunts down dead people who refuse to move on to the afterlife. Bridges played his partner, a Wild West lawman who died in the 1800s. The concept wasn't terrible, but the execution was. Critics savaged the film, calling it a lazy ripoff that brought nothing new to the table. The special effects looked cheap despite the massive budget, and the chemistry between Reynolds and Bridges never clicked. R.I.P.D. cost $130 million to make and only brought in $78 million worldwide. Universal lost around $52 million, and the film became another black mark on Ryan Reynolds' resume. He'd eventually redeem himself with Deadpool, but R.I.P.D. remains one of the most forgettable action flops of the 2000s. Number 8. 47 Ronin. Keanu Reeves has had one of the most interesting careers in Hollywood. He's had massive hits like The Matrix and John Wick, but he's also starred in some spectacular failures. 47 Ronin is one of them. This samurai epic was supposed to be Universal's big holiday release for 2013. The studio spent a staggering $225 million when you include marketing costs. The film went through extensive reshoots, delays, and production problems that pushed the budget higher and higher. The story was based on a famous Japanese legend about a group of samurai who seek revenge for their master's death. Universal tried to turn it into a fantasy action spectacle with dragons, witches, and elaborate fight sequences. They also made the controversial decision to cast Keanu Reeves as the lead, even though the story is deeply rooted in Japanese culture. Audiences didn't show up. The film made $151 million worldwide, which sounds decent until you realize it needed to make well over $500 million just to break even. Universal lost around $74 million, and the film's failure led to a major shakeup at the studio. 47. Ronin is a perfect example of what happens when a studio tries to turn a culturally specific story into a generic blockbuster. It pleased no one and cost everyone involved a fortune. Number 7. Mortal Engines. Peter Jackson is one of the most successful directors in Hollywood history. The Lord of the Rings trilogy made billions and won a pile of Oscars. So when he announced he was producing a new fantasy epic called Mortal Engines, studios lined up to throw money at him. Universal gave him somewhere between $150 and $170 million to bring this steampunk world to life. The film was set in a post-apocalyptic future where entire cities have been mounted on wheels and roam the earth consuming smaller towns for resources. It's a wild concept, and the visuals were genuinely impressive. But impressive visuals don't mean much if audiences don't care about the story or characters. Mortal Engines opened in December 2018 and immediately flopped. It made only $83 million worldwide, resulting in losses somewhere between $100 and $170 million, depending on which budget estimate you believe. The failure of Mortal Engines proved that even Peter Jackson's name wasn't enough to guarantee success. Audiences had moved on from the kind of sprawling fantasy epics that dominated the early 2000s, and no amount of impressive CGI could change that. Number 6. Battleship. In 2012, Universal Pictures decided to make a movie based on the board game Battleship. Yes, the board game where you call out coordinates and try to sink your opponent's ships. How do you turn that into a 2-hour action movie? You add aliens. Battleship starred Taylor Kitsch, fresh off another massive flop called John Carter, and Rihanna in her first major film role. The plot involved an alien invasion that forces a ragtag group of Navy sailors to use old battleship tactics to save the world. It was loud, dumb, and exactly the kind of mindless summer blockbuster that usually makes a fortune. Except it didn't. The film cost $209 million to make and brought in $303 million worldwide. That might sound like a profit, but when you factor in marketing costs and the fact that studios only get about half of international box office revenue, Battleship lost somewhere between $100 and $150 million. The film's failure killed Universal's plans to turn board games into action franchises. There would be no Monopoly movie, no Clue reboot, and definitely no Battleship sequel. Sometimes a board game should just stay a board game. Number 5. Stealth. In 2005, Sony Pictures thought they had the next Top Gun on their hands. Stealth was a high-tech action thriller about 3 elite Navy pilots who get assigned to work with an artificial intelligence-controlled fighter jet. When the AI goes rogue, they have to stop it before it starts World War III. The film starred Josh Lucas, Jessica Biel, and Jamie Foxx, all of whom were rising stars at the time. Sony spent between $135 and $138 million on production, creating elaborate aerial sequences and cutting-edge special effects. But audiences weren't interested in a movie about killer AI jets. Stealth opened in July 2005 and immediately crashed. It made only $76 million worldwide, resulting in losses around $125 million. Critics destroyed the film, calling it a soulless tech demo with cardboard characters and a ridiculous plot. The failure of Stealth damaged the careers of everyone involved and proved that not every military action movie can be the next Top Gun. Sometimes you're just making a movie about a plane that goes crazy and nobody cares. Number 4. Mars Needs Moms. You might be wondering what an animated movie is doing on a list of action flops. Well, Mars Needs Moms cost $150 million, featured elaborate action sequences, and bombed harder than almost any movie in history. It belongs here. Disney released this motion capture animated film in 2011, hoping to replicate the success of movies like The Polar Express. The story followed a young boy who travels to Mars to rescue his mother after she's kidnapped by aliens who want to use her parenting skills to raise their own children. The problem was that the motion capture animation looked creepy and off-putting. The characters fell deep into the uncanny valley, and kids were genuinely disturbed by how they looked. Parents took one look at the trailers and decided this wasn't a movie they wanted to take their children to see. Mars Needs Moms made only $39 million worldwide. Disney lost somewhere between $140 and $150 million. It's one of the biggest animated flops in history and effectively killed Disney's interest in motion capture animation. The film's failure also had real-world consequences. Image Movers Digital, the studio that produced it, was shut down shortly after the film's release. Hundreds of people lost their jobs because audiences didn't want to watch creepy-looking animated characters rescue their moms from Mars. Number 3. King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. Guy Ritchie is known for making stylish crime thrillers like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and Snatch. So when Warner Brothers hired him to direct a King Arthur movie, people were curious to see what he'd do with the material. What he did was spend $175 million, making a loud, chaotic mess that nobody wanted to see. King Arthur, Legend of the Sword tried to turn the classic legend into a fast-paced action movie with Ritchie's signature quick cuts and stylized violence. Charlie Hunnam played Arthur as a street-smart hustler who discovers he's the rightful king of England. The film was supposed to launch a 6-movie franchise. Warner Brothers had big plans to build a cinematic universe around Arthurian legend, but audiences didn't care. The movie made only $148 million worldwide, losing Warner Brothers around $150 million. The failure killed the franchise before it even started. All those planned sequels were canceled, and Warner Brothers had to write off the entire investment. King Arthur, Legend of the Sword proved that not every classic story needs to be turned into a modern action franchise, and not every director's style works for every genre. Number 2, Cutthroat Island. Before Pirates of the Caribbean proved that pirate movies could be massive hits, Hollywood was convinced they were box office poison, and the reason they believed that was because of Cutthroat Island. Released in 1995, Cutthroat Island was supposed to be a swashbuckling adventure epic that would make Geena Davis a major action star. Director Rennie Harlin, who was married to Davis at the time, convinced Carolco Pictures to give him $115 million to make the most expensive pirate movie ever filmed. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Michael Douglas was originally cast as the male lead, but dropped out when he found out Davis was starring. When Davis learned Douglas was leaving, she tried to back out too, but her contract wouldn't let her. The production was plagued with problems. Sets had to be torn down and rebuilt. The script went through constant rewrites. Crew members quit in frustration. When the film finally came out, it was a disaster. Cutthroat Island made somewhere between $10 and $18 million worldwide. Carolco Pictures lost around $147 million when adjusted for inflation. The loss was so catastrophic that it bankrupted the studio. Carolco Pictures, which had produced hits like Rambo and Total Recall, went out of business. Cutthroat Island held the record as the biggest box office bomb in history for years. It killed the pirate movie genre for nearly a decade and effectively ended Geena Davis's career as an action star. It's a legendary disaster that film students still study as an example of how not to make a movie. Number 1, John Carter. And now we come to the biggest action movie flop of all time. John Carter, Disney's $263 million disaster that lost the studio over $200 million and led to the resignation of the studio head, who greenlit it. John Carter was based on a series of novels by Edgar Rice Burroughs, the same author who created Tarzan. Disney had been trying to make this movie since the 1980s. The story follows a Civil War veteran who gets transported to Mars and becomes a hero in an alien war. Disney spared no expense. They hired Taylor Kitsch, who was being positioned as the next big action star. They brought in director Andrew Stanton, who had just won an Oscar for Wall-E. They built massive sets, created elaborate alien creatures, and filmed extensive action sequences. But the production was troubled from the start. There were constant arguments about the script. 18 scenes had to be completely reshot. The marketing campaign was a disaster. Disney hired an ad agency that had no experience marketing movies, and it showed. They used Led Zeppelin's Kashmir in a Super Bowl ad, even though the target audience was kids who had probably never heard of Led Zeppelin. Disney also seemed to give up on the film early. They moved the release date multiple times, and didn't even promote it on the Disney Channel like they usually did with their big releases. Some people speculate that Disney sabotaged the film on purpose because they were in the process of buying Star Wars and didn't want a competing sci-fi franchise. Whatever the reason, John Carter bombed spectacularly. It made $284 million worldwide, which sounds decent until you realize it needed to make at least $650 million just to break even. Disney lost over $200 million, making it the biggest box office bomb in history when adjusted for inflation. The failure of John Carter changed Disney's entire strategy. They stopped taking risks on original properties and focused almost exclusively on sequels, remakes, and established franchises. It's why we've gotten so many live-action remakes of animated classics and endless Marvel movies. Disney learned that it's safer to make a mediocre sequel to a proven property than to gamble on something new. John Carter was supposed to launch a trilogy. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about the dangers of spending too much money on a property that audiences don't care about. It's the ultimate example of Hollywood hubris, and it cost Disney a fortune. So there you have it. The 10 biggest action movie flops of all time. From pirate disasters to sci-fi catastrophes, these films prove that no matter how much money you spend, there's no guarantee of success. Sometimes, the bigger the budget, the harder the fall. What's interesting is that most of these disasters happened in the last 20 years. Studios have been spending more and more money on action blockbusters, and when they fail bigger than ever before. John Carter, Battleship, King Arthur, and Mortal Engines all came out in the last decade, and they all lost over $100 million each. Part of the problem is that studios have convinced themselves that bigger is always better. They think that if they just spend enough money on special effects and marketing, audiences will show up. But these films prove that's not true. Audiences want good stories and characters they care about. No amount of CGI can make up for a boring plot or unlikable heroes. Another issue is that studios have become risk-averse in all the wrong ways. They're willing to spend $200 million on a movie, but they're not willing to take creative risks. They want every film to appeal to the widest possible audience, which often means the films end up appealing to no one. John Carter tried to be a sci-fi epic, a romance, a war movie, and a comedy all at once. It failed at all of them because it never committed to being any one thing. The streaming era has also changed how we think about box office bombs. A movie like Mortal Engines might have found an audience on Netflix or Disney+, but because it was released theatrically with a massive budget, it's considered a failure. Studios are now more cautious about which movies get theatrical releases and which ones go straight to streaming. But here's the thing about box office bombs. Sometimes they're not as bad as they seem. Cutthroat Island might have bankrupted Carolco Pictures, but it's developed a cult following over the years. People appreciate it as a fun, old-school adventure movie that doesn't take itself too seriously. Stealth is terrible, but it's the kind of terrible that's fun to watch with friends while making fun of it. And sometimes, the people involved in these disasters go on to bigger and better things. Ryan Reynolds bounced back from R.I.P.D. with Deadpool. Keanu Reeves followed up 47 Ronin with the John Wick franchise. Even Taylor Kitsch, who starred in two of the biggest flops on this list, has found steady work in television. The lesson here isn't that Hollywood should stop making big-budget action movies. It's that they need to be smarter about which ones they make. Audiences are more sophisticated than studios give them credit for. They can tell when a movie is a cynical cash grab and when it's a genuine attempt to tell a good story. These 10 films represent billions of dollars in losses. They ended careers, shut down studios, and changed the way Hollywood does business. But they also serve as reminders that in the movie business, nothing is guaranteed. You can have the biggest stars, the most expensive special effects, and the best marketing campaign in the world, and still end up with a disaster. So the next time you see a trailer for a massive action blockbuster with a budget that could fund a small country, remember these films. Remember that sometimes the most expensive movies are the biggest failures. And remember that in Hollywood, the only thing more spectacular than success is catastrophic failure. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Hollywood's biggest disasters, do me a favor and hit that like button. And if you want to see more videos about the movies that Hollywood wishes everyone would forget, subscribe to the channel. We've got plenty more stories about spectacular failures, behind-the-scenes disasters, and the films that changed the industry for better or worse. Let me know in the comments which of these flops surprised you the most. Did you see any of these movies in theaters? Do you think any of them deserve to fail? Or were some of them actually pretty good? I want to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.